Today, I thought a bit of like which angle to take for the conference, and basically just to give a bit of the background about myself and why I decided to speak in this direction. Myself, I'm actually a technical person by background, so I did study at ETH, so that was an amazing opportunity as well. I did my master's there, then PhD in Oslo on robotics and computer vision, way before it was like the sexy topic, let's say. And then for me, the question was always like when you're in academia doing research, kind of pushing the limits. So for me, it was kind of in medical robotics. Why such a big amount of that work actually gets stuck at the publication and kind of shelved in so many cases? And why is it so hard to bring it to the real world? Is it technical problem? Is it business problem? Or where is the actual moat? After basically exiting academia and going in startups, because I thought, okay, that's where it's created. You can iterate fast, you can create the products. And I worked also in robotics related to healthcare. And the problem was still the same, actually. To deploy the robots, to sign partnerships with corporations, it's much more difficult than you initially anticipate. And the thing is that quite often the problem is not really the technology itself. So that kind of brought me thinking, okay, what if I take a look from the other side? So that's when I joined corporate and actually even completed the EMBA studies to kind of level the field when it comes to technical talk and to business talk. And first of all, I was working as technology scout. So basically really looking for startups that we can partner with and bring these technologies to Sony. And currently I'm part of strategy and partnerships, kind of dual role both at Sony as the main corporation and Sony AI, our targeted R&D arm. Kind of combining this knowledge going from academia and research to startup world to corporation, and also doing quite a few different advisory roles from financial point of view and also corporate point of view. I try to put together this idea of how AI and nowadays physical AI, when it goes corporate, what are the problems and why in reality most of the top executives and boards are not ready for that yet. So today we have heard from many different angles about physical AI, about blockchain, how actually this comes together, from healthcare to agriculture to drones. And it is extremely exciting already today what the technology can do. And we kind of get indication where it's heading towards. But what I want to tell is basically what happens when, in corporation, the CFO asks about physical AI and how do we incorporate that next week on Monday, and why most of these conversations usually go quite badly. So let's kind of start a bit of how the information might flow when it comes, for example, in academia, startups, and corporations. Just last month, actually, one of these reports are from last week, and that's what I decided to base my whole talk about, is World Economic Forum. Everyone knows it. It takes basically in our backyard in Graubünden in Davos. And there are constantly reports coming out basically about the technology convergence, new technologies that will be adopted, and the next generation physical autonomy. That's kind of the big story now. And I think quite a few of you might have visited Davos. I was there in January as well. And of course, we have the main Congress Center, where there's a lot of politicians deciding on, discussing on geopolitical situation, on regulations, and so on. But the whole town is converted into many, many different houses focused on certain topics. And like, for example, House of AI was really hot. It was really hard to get a spot there, and there was really high-level people there. And there was a lot of interest coming also from the leaders of the companies and politicians and so on, joining the sessions and even discussing. And then you go to different houses, especially organized by big corporations. This year, what I noticed, the topic was AI. It was really discussions on various aspects of AI, how it affects our lives, what is happening, where it's going to go. And to be honest, looking at these reports, what has been covered, I have no doubt that next January we'll add physical to it. So it's really going to be the physical AI is going to be that topic that everything goes around. Basically, these documents, is really how this information reaches top executives in the companies. We'll go on a couple of aspects when it comes on the adoption of AI and physical AI, in this case, in corporate world in general, from what I've seen. So looking at these reports, there were 3 numbers that really defined the moment and stood out. So from interviews with close to 1,700 senior executives, 67% of them called physical AI game-changing basically last week already. And there were 23 high potential technologies identified as kind of convergence combinations that should be adopted, and physical AI was really at the top of it. But in reality, probably around 0% of the boards can actually articulate a proper, specific physical AI strategy among their companies and the boards. And that's not from the report, as you can imagine, but that's actually from many of the discussions that I had personally, like officially and unofficially, with top executives or also on consulting basis. And I'm sure that this number is right. Let's actually take a look why there is, because there is kind of a situation now where researchers and engineers understand what's coming, or at least have a good idea and educated guess what's coming with this technology being adopted, but boards do not. And now this asymmetry is quite dangerous, because it's not only the software layer that sometimes can be adapted quite quickly, but now it's marriage between software and hardware with physical consequences when we deploy these methods. So I think it's really important to actually try to close this gap. And I think we can do that also by being like technology providers to actually present it in the right way so that it's more understandable for the boards. In one of the 2 reports, there were 4 futures defined specifically for physical AI. One is proven deployment. So take more structured environments like logistics, sports, mining, and so on, where there's specific need, and there's already a lot of experimentation ongoing and POCs. And basically, it's quite likely that we'll have a steady growth in the structured environments of like AI methods are already adapted, automation is adapted, now more physical AI where these methods will come in, possibly like with blockchain verification as well, to make sure everything functions in the right way. And the investment is kind of gradual, typical in these situations, and public trust is also built gradually because we have controlled environment, and it's less likely that some big accidents might occur. This might still happen, but probably on the same level that it's unfortunately normal in these circumstances. Then we have integrated process, so maybe even a bit closer to what Julia was talking about earlier, where robotics and physical AI supports healthcare, construction, medicine, and so on, with a shared oversight, really transparency and security at the forefront of it. So it's a bit harder and more distant to achieve, but it's kind of moving towards, and there's a lot of disciplined effort towards this. Third future is technological disillusionment. That's where we kind of get into the hype moment, where really there is a lot of, I would call also over-promising or maybe kind of skewed understanding of what are the capabilities. And there's a lot of promises saying like, okay, we can do it if we get the money. And that means if there's enough convincing, the money starts flowing. But at the same time, big failures, big public failures come in. And what happens then? There is basically a backtrack. So there's a really big screw up, investment stops, projects get killed, and adoption really stalls. And the critical part is that in most of the cases, the adoption doesn't stop at the player that failed. It stops at the whole field moving forward. So even if somebody was undertaking and taking gradual, disciplined steps, they will really struggle to grow, get the investment, get the partnerships, and so on. And the most dangerous aspect is so-called divided deployment. That's basically where we have a few actors controlling most of the data, most of the compute, and then end up usually controlling the supply chains. And to be honest, we do see a lot of warning signs already today in this direction. So we see big tech companies developing LLMs. Now there's a lot of acquisitions in kind of physical AI space. Maybe not a lot yet, but it's already targeted acquisitions there. And sometimes it's about technology, but sometimes it's really about the control in reality. And I think being from Switzerland and Europe, it's actually, there is a risk that Europe might become more of the consumer of physical AI technology rather than a producer. And there's still definitely going to be elements where we're really good at, but as kind of the full product and so on, I think that's exactly what ETH Robotics Club is doing like great job trying to do a full stack. Even though it's hard, it might not match the accuracy, especially in the beginning, but that's how we learn, that's what we see, and that's where we see like critical components. So yeah, if you haven't visited these guys, go to the hangar. It's really amazing like what they do and kind of trying to solve some of these also unpopular problems along the way. Basically, what we end up with eventually is very powerful systems, but really fragmented and hard to govern. And the funny part is that the geopolitical situation also comes into play. So sometimes governments are really even adjusting kind of the laws or controls to allow that country or companies from that specific country to really accelerate by giving exceptions or kind of turning blind eye a little bit to like certain aspects, just so they're kind of at the winning race, because we also enter various aspects like dual use, and there is like many aspects in play here. So I think that this is something that we should really observe. And in terms of like labs, company, country, we should really think in which scenario overall we're currently on track of. Not the one that we want to be on track of, but what are the actual critical signs heading towards this. Let's actually take a step back and take a look from the inside when it comes for big corporations, let's say, adopting physical AI. So when you talk to the board members, top managers, and so on, there are a couple of conversations that are kind of recurring. One, and probably most common, is we are monitoring the space of physical AI and adoption. But the thing is that, you know, monitoring is not really a strategy. It's just simply observation. So when we look at what's happening, we also don't get like the full picture. Take humanoids, for example. You see a lot of backflips, a lot of like mechanical aspects, but when we want to deploy, there are many things that are not shared publicly. It's only in internal collaborations and internal deployments, and it's really extremely difficult to actually understand the current state of the technology. And these first movers, they will try a lot, they will fail a lot, but once the direction is figured out, they will be ahead of the field and they will not necessarily share it among. So it's going to be extremely hard to catch up with first movers, if possible at all. And if you actually want to catch up, the investment will be probably 10 or 100-fold compared to if you try to stay ahead of the field to some extent together. Second aspect, which I hear quite often, is our core business is not affected yet. And we heard that with a lot of different technologies coming in. LLMs is a great example. That this disruption doesn't really quite announce itself because, yeah, I mean, if you are running, some business, maybe you don't have direct need for deploying a robot or kind of optimizing, machinery with AI that produces something. But it doesn't affect core business yet until the competitor does it, and suddenly they can cut the costs, produce better, produce faster, or basically create something. And then it's going to affect your business like hit like a rock, And business is business. It is eventually about the money. It's kind of the right question is that for investment in certain technology, we need to see return on investment. But the thing is that the question is right, but I think typically the timing or at least the window of ROI is not really correct in most of the cases. Because when it comes to AI, if you have super cool model, but you're not really prepared for deployment, and honestly, in so many conversations I heard of many AI consultants saying, oh, we have like a magic method that we can slap on top of your data. You don't have to worry about anything, and it's going to optimize. You're going to find everything. It's going to be like new magic system that will solve all your data problems internally. I mean, whoever worked with AI, they know it's totally not true. And there is a lot of effort needed to actually basically clean up your backyard. All the data, methods, processes, and so on. So you need to prepare the ecosystem and do the homework, which will not really provide any direct ROI in the near future. But if you have the whole ecosystem and structure ready, that means you can actually exchange and adapt these models, robots or whatever, a lot more efficient and controlled and safe manner. So one great example which I can think of is Figure AI. So they had their humanoids, I think Figure 2 robots, deployed in BMW factory, and they operated for 8 or 9 months. And then it was just a few months, like some really nice numbers announced of like 30,000 hours of operation over deployment, that they were completing a couple of tasks. But if you translate it also without having insider knowledge, but take 2 shifts, which is regular in automotive industry, and number of hours over the same period, the uptime was around 50% plus minus. In industry, anything under 95% basically doesn't work at all. And the cost of the robot was much higher, around 30-40% higher than actually human labor for exactly the same tasks, and it was still limited to like few applications. So when you look from that point of view, that's probably a failure. But again, they actually collected a lot of data. Probably there were loads of Figure AI engineers actually observing what's happening, on like working on platform improvements and so on. So really basing decisions just on ROI, I think it can be quite dangerous, because you will definitely lose this first mover advantage. So really have to think, okay, which parts of it you need to solve and what to do. So let's move on to a few things that you can do and you must do if you want to adopt from a corporation point of view, like the new technologies such as AI and physical AI. So first of all, really put it on the agenda, like starting Monday, starting next week. Not what we play around with, or we bought some, licenses, or we bought one Unity robot to run around the corridors and showcase on factory floors. That's not going to cut it. But what you need is really identify, do you have something that can be automated? And also, is your ecosystem ready for this automation before you really narrow down on specific use cases? Because it's not really about the technology, it's really about the partnerships that you might establish. They take time, data governance, integration architecture, and so on, because otherwise you end up like rushing it and really not utilizing the maximum effectiveness of this. And the thing is that what I notice myself a lot, you have strategy teams, you have developer teams, you have executive teams, and quite often this task is given, let's say, to your innovation strategy team. But quite often they don't have like a full-on understanding of the technical capabilities and how it's going to get there. Same, and engineers and researchers are not necessarily even that interested in like the business aspects. But I think in every single company, you'll find a few people who are constantly, sharing the news and kind of identifying as like, look, if we apply this method for this process, maybe it can cut it. And I think it's quite important to actually talk to them and say, okay, do you actually want to have like a mandate and a task to explore this? Can we apply it? Can it work? Who should we work with, and so on? Probably have these people already in the organization. You just need to empower them. As we move for drinks, I think kind of the main question eventually, if physical AI matures on schedule in one way or another, will your company organization will really be the shaper, or more a consumer trying to catch up and apply like these methods to what we have? So I hope that gave a bit of thought, not necessarily like very specific info, but yeah, that's what I wanted to share for today. Thank you very much.